John 1:16, God is whoever lives in love lives in God because God is love, right? Or worse, I may be paraphrasing it incorrectly, but it says God is love is the point I'm trying to get to, right? Yes. Now, what is love? And don't say, baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. No more. What is love?
Biblically speaking,
don't say God either. You can't say that.
No, it's a number of different things. It's a number of different things. I mean, there's phileo love, there's brotherly love, there's, I can't remember the other one. There's another one. I think
there's the love of secular rarity who just supplied $10 and wants to thank you for being a great interlocutor and is praising this show. So to me, I call that an act of love.
I think ultimately when God talks and says that I am love, he's speaking of agape love. He's speaking of a love that I guess the best way to say it is an unconditional love. It is a love that is regardless of what you do, I am going to have this for you. Which I know you would look at and say, hey, wait a minute, how is this unconditional love when you say that you love me so much, but yet if I do go against these laws that you're suddenly now sending me to hell? Am I right?
Yeah, if there's conditions upon which I need to be saved, then his love is not conditional.
See, and
it's not unconditional.
But that would
be a contradiction.
That would hold true if it was unconditional love, where it was an arbitrary choice of whether or not he loves you or not. I would, like, if you don't live by these things, I am going to choose to push you out. That's not what happens with God. What happens is that if you go outside of the conditions, it means you go outside of being compatible with his nature. And where agape love comes in is that he still loves you despite the fact that you've gone outside of being compatible with him, to the point where he says, I go all the way to the cross for you. Before the foundations of the earth were laid, before he created anything, he actually had already determined that he was going to die for you. And
Greg, does God love the people who are in hell?
Yes. Yes, he does.
Okay. When we talk about love, the Bible kind of defines love. It gives a definition of love, doesn't it? 1 Corinthians 13 talks about the attributes.
Love is all those different things. Yeah.
Yeah. Love is patient. It says a bunch of different things. And I'm wondering if we consider that the Bible, that this biblical description of love is true, and if we go off the Bible's definition of love, does God meet the characteristics of love as defined in the Bible?
I think absolutely. I mean, we can look up the verse if you want to and walk through it. I'm happy to do that.
Let's do that in the time we have left. It's 1 Corinthians 13 verses 4 through 8.
Do you want me to grab my Bible, or
I can read it. I have it prepared.
Okay, go for it.
If you want to do it.
You got it. I trust you.
So we started with love is patient.
Don't read the atheist Bible, though. I don't trust that one.
I'm just kidding. I don't know.
I'm just grieving you.
Gotcha.
Go for it.
Love is kind, though. This one's probably debatable. You and I would probably disagree here. You would probably view the Christian God as kind based on certain actions he does. I would probably say that he's kind to certain people, sometimes unkind to other people at other times. He wasn't kind to, the firstborn children of Egypt when he used them, as a demonstration of his power.
To the Amalekites or to the Canaanites.
Many other examples. Yeah. Right. Now, love does not envy.
Yes.
Does God envy? According to the Bible.
I don't think so. I mean, I know it says that he's a jealous God, but I think that when it talks about him being a jealous God, he's jealous for us, not for himself. He
Why
doesn't
do you think that?
Well, because he knows that if we pursue something other than him as God, then ultimately what we're choosing is ultimately a way that leads to death. And so he's jealous for us. He wants us to have what is in him, which is life. So I think he's jealous for us.
I mean, that's a very generous reading of the passage. The passage in question that I'm thinking of is Exodus 25.
Yeah.
For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third or fourth generation of those who hate me.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it's about us. It sounds like it's about him in
It's
context.
I'm actually wrestling with that verse to let you know.
Let's
Yes.
just look at the fact that there is a punishment,
Yep.
and the reason is because those hate him. It sounds like it's about. It sounds like he is jealous.
Well, what it means to hate, what is it? You have to define what it means to hate him. And when you hate him, you're hating what it means to be his essence.
Well, in the context of the passage is the Israelite. This is an extension of the commandment not to have other gods before me, not to worship the other gods, right?
Yes, yes.
Which would include idolatry and all that other stuff. Giving your praises to something other than God. God deserves your praises, and He is a jealous God. And anyone who is giving praises to someone other than God is demonstrative of hating Him. That's the reasonable way, I think, to interpret that.
Because you're hating the nature of who he is, and you're saying that you like the nature of what this other thing is,
right?
And that the nature of that other thing is something that actually ends up. There's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death. If you
right,
want
but it
something
leads
other
to
than
death because of God makes it lead to death. It's His rule.
No, it's because you end up getting in a state where you're out incompatible with his nature. Remember, I don't think that God arbitrarily decides that, hey, this is good or bad because this is what I choose as being good or bad. It's that this is good or bad on the basis of whether or not doing it or not doing it keeps you in compatibility with my nature or not.
Okay. Well, love does not boast.
Yes.
Does God ever boast in the Bible?
Um, I actually I don't think
Are there,
so.
are there any passages that you could interpret as God boasting that you can recall?
What does it mean to boast?
To brag or to bolster yourself up as someone who is better,
So if I say
or higher or great, to
if
brag
Barry
about your
Bonds came
achievements.
to me and said, "Hey, Greg, I'm a good baseball player," would he be boasting or would he just be saying the truth?
Well, I would say that he would be doing both because he actually is a good baseball player. There's other baseball players who suck who might say that they're a good baseball player and they're boasting as well. Let me put it this way. Let's use a different example. Let's say Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali says, "I am the greatest,"
yes,
he was the heavyweight champion of the world when he said it.
right.
Is that not boasting, though, the way that he said it? I think most people would argue that that is still boasting. It's true,
Yeah.
but it's boasting.
Well, but we also don't know every single person that was out there. Not every single person that was out there actually did become a fighter. It could be that there were hundreds of people out there that actually could have beaten Muhammad Ali. He just had never faced them because they never got in the ring.
But Greg, the point I'm trying to make
but
is
with
that,
God,
yeah,
it's an absolute statement. When he says he's good, he is good. It would not be boasting. It would just be a statement of fact. The difference between God and Ali is that every single time God says it, it's
yeah.
absolutely true.
But why does it need to be said? See, the thing that makes something boasting
I would
is
say
that when there's something true, something objectively and demonstrably true about you, if it's something that makes you appear good to other people, it doesn't need to be said. And the reason we criticize boasting isn't because the thing that's being said is true or false. It's because you are taking you are taking the unnecessary step of stating an obvious, seemingly for your own pleasure. And that's why we usually.
Well, two things. I think one, remember when he's talking about this verse, he's speaking about the way that we define how humans are going to love one another is more often than not.
Mhm.
With God, being the definition of love is himself. And I know you said don't go to that, but
I mean, you can do it. I just think it's a circular
he's
argument.
trying to give you some way of in your human sense of trying to understand it. That the way we would demonstrate love to one another is that we probably wouldn't end up boasting about stuff.
Why
Because
does he
we better talk about
why does he continuously request, expect, and demand reverence?
worship.
Yeah.
I think it's because, and I thought about this for 3 years. Almost this
Hallowed be
one.
thy name is in the Lord's Prayer, Matthew 6.
That's right. And I think
Why?
the Bible says that God inhabits the praises of Israel. So there is, if with absence of praise, there's actually, if in the presence of praise, there is actually a place that is actually created, I think, where God, in the three personages of himself in the Trinity, actually knows himself experientially in a different way.
God does not dishonor others. I suppose, well, do I really need to give examples of God dishonoring other people throughout Scripture? I mean, I could look in the Old Testament or New, but
Well, I would say that
certainly we talked about
in
hell. I mean,
reality, but in reality, I think the answer is you don't dishonor something that doesn't deserve any honor to begin with. We don't, because of our fallen state away from being compatible with him, being perfect or what have you, we're in a state of ourselves being dishonorable.
do you think that
And therefore,
children are dishonorable?
do I think children are dishonorable? Um, I think they enter into this world uh, in a state where they are not perfect because of coming from imperfect people. I think as soon as they make their first choice to walk outside of God's will, which happens with everything, everyone that has their own will is eventually going to choose their will over thy will, that they become fallen.
When does that happen? At like what age does that happen?
I think it's different for different people.
Does it ever happen in infancy?
Um, I don't think so.
Okay, I wouldn't think so either. If
Yeah.
God orders the death of infants, wouldn't that be a dishonorable act since they're not dishonorable people?
Um, I think the hard part of that is that it sounds dishonorable in itself, but no actions of God take place in a vacuum where all you're looking at is that one action. If
What do you mean?
if it's unto the end of dealing with something with Pharaoh and allowing his people to be set free so that they can continue on. You've got to remember that the children of Israel, no matter if you think they're righteous or not righteous, they are a bridge between Adam and the Messiah.
Sure. So he had his reason. He had
his
reasons for
it.
doing it, but that doesn't absolve him from the act being dishonorable. That doesn't say that the act is not dishonorable anymore just because he has reasons. People do dishonorable things and they have reasons that to them are justified, even if they themselves recognize the act as dishonorable, but it doesn't mean that the act wasn't dishonorable anymore.
That would be one of those ones where I would have to step back and again, and I do this from time to time where I'll say I'll have to think about that one more.
Okay, fair enough.
That's what I would have to think about more, because I would look at it and say, I believe God is always honorable, is perfectly just, perfectly righteous. I would have to study that and talk to God about it and say, God, you're going to have to deal with me on this one and show me why.
Love is not self-seeking.
Yes.
God, everything is created through him, for him, through him, by him, and for him, according to Colossians and another passage. I think John.
Yes.
Right? John 1 and Colossians 1 both say that everything was created for him.
For him. Yes.
Okay. Is that not self-seeking?
It's, I mean, just because it's for him, I don't know.
That's the point of everything.
I'll have to think about that one.
And then the final one was that this is not the final one in the list, but it's the one that jumps out at me. It keeps no record of wrongs. And I find this one to be particularly problematic when we juxtapose it with Revelation 20, in which John says, And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were open. Another book was open, which was the
Book
book
of
of
deeds.
life. The
Book of
dead were
deeds.
judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up its dead, and then death and Hades were. And then death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done.
Yeah.
So in this case, there is a record of wrongs.
I think it's what you end up with is a situation where God has made it completely possible for you to have, and for everyone to have, every record wiped and thrown into the sea of forgetfulness for no cost whatsoever on the part of that person. And what you end up is in a place where if you aren't going to trust on or rely on his deed, which erases everything, then you're left in a place where you are stuck with your own deeds and whether or not that makes you righteous or not.
Do you see though how, as it's written, it can seem that God is not love? If love keeps no record of wrongs, and God has a record of people's wrongs, and they're judged by that, do you see how that can make it appear to be a contradiction?
I can see how you can take it that way, but again, I think you have to ask the question of what was the intention behind 1 Corinthians 15. Is it to define God's love, or is it to define what it means to how to interact appropriately and love one another within the confines of ourselves being fallen people?
So
And
when
he's
we
trying to
say
give the
God
more
is
perfect
love,
example of love. Yeah.
so when we say God is love, we can't say that he's the kind of love that we would recognize as love and actually care about. He's a special kind of love that's very different.
I think
And
I think it's a kind of love that we don't have words for. I think
okay,
it's almost impossible to describe, almost like it's impossible for us to describe what it means to be perfect.